Well, hello, year 12. Hope you're all at home, staying safe, and everyone belonging to you is safe as well. So, enough of the small talk. Let's get on with some work. Okay, so last week we looked at the House of Lords, and the essay which you should email to me was about whether the reform had gone far enough. This slide here is really the summary of the arguments that was in that Scotland Today programme, grouped together all the arguments for abolishing and against abolishing, and hopefully you were able to use some of those arguments in the essay which you should email to me. So, having looked at the argument as to whether the House of Lords is working well and should be left alone or whether it needs further reform, the next step then is to look at what shape this reform could take. So what are the options for reforming the House of Lords? Well, option number one is you could go for 100% elected second chamber. So you do have the House of Lords and then you have an elected second chamber, which wouldn't be called the House of Lords, it would be called something like the Senate. So what are the arguments for and against? Well, for most Democrats, clearly an elected second chamber would be the most democratic option. It would mean that the members of that chamber will be accountable, unlike the current Lords. An elected second chamber would be more an effective check and balance on the government power, because as we know, the House of Lords is a very weak check and balance. Its powers are limited by statute, the Parliament Acts, and by convention, the Salisbury Convention. If it was elected, it wouldn't have to be elected on first past the post. It could be elected on a PR systems with different constituencies, such as the European Parliament constituencies we have now, which would give you a different type of representation and also give you a better balance of representation as well, with some of the criticisms in the Commons. So lots of advantages to an elected second chamber. However, those who would say no to a 100% elected second chamber, the usual old argument that you would lose much of the existing expertise and independence. People like Alan Sugar and well-known live peers would simply not bother standing for election, although having looked at the Electoral Reform Society booklet, you can question just how much expertise and independence there is in the Lords. A kind of more interesting argument is, if you had an elected second chamber, would it have the same legitimacy as the Commons, that it would be too powerful and be able to challenge the Commons, leading to what you get in America at the moment, this idea of gridlock. Because at the moment, the argument is we do have Commons primacy, so with all the drawbacks with that, at least we do get strong, stable government, we get things done. If you move towards an elected second chamber with co-equal chambers like in the US Congress, would that lead to gridlock? Some people say it's unnecessary to have two chambers. Just get rid of it altogether. If you did have an elected second chamber, similar to the arguments with referendums, which have voter fatigue, you would most certainly have to have some kind of new constitutional arrangement as to separating the powers between the two chambers and who would be able to do what, etc. And even not elected under PR, would it simply be another party-dominated chamber like the Commons? Nick Clegg, in his proposed reforms, he was going for part elected, part appointed, which we'll come back to later, but the idea was the elected people would only be elected for a single term of 15 years, which would make them more independent. But of course, by have a single term, it reduced the accountability. So there are some of the arguments for and against 100% elected chamber. The next option, which is the other slightly extreme, will be 100% appointed chamber. Now, why on earth would you want to have a 100% appointed chamber? Well, it could be used to strengthen expertise. You could appoint a complete chamber of experts, get rid of all the political placemen, the bishops, the hereditaries, and appoint experts in certain areas, which would greatly enhance its revising and expertise strength. The people you appoint could help maybe address the weaknesses of descriptive representation that you find in the elected chamber, in the Commons, in terms of groups that are underrepresented. So you could more mirror the country socially and politically, and this chamber of experts would be more independent of party discipline. However, there'd be an awful lot of patronage power. Even with an appointments commissioner, independence appointments commission, somebody was still going to have to nominate these people and appoint them. And of course, the main underlying criticism is it's still undemocratic. The people in there would lack legitimacy, they would lack accountability. And the second chamber, and the original rationale for second chambers is they act as a check and a balance on the other chamber. That will be weakened as well, because an elected, appointed second chamber would not be an effective check and balance. So that would be option 2. Third option, a bit like Hove's best of both, go for a part elected, part appointed. And in a way, the arguments in favour of that is simply a summary of the arguments in favour of an elected and appointment. It would be possibly a democratic option with the elected people. Use PR, the appointed element could strengthen expertise and could also strengthen descriptive representation. But of course the arguments against would mirror that as well. Along with another argument would be, would you be creating 2 types of member, as you currently have with AMS in Scotland and Wales? You have some people elected under first past the post, someone at the list, and the first past the post people claim greater legitimacy. Would the members of a part elected, part appointment chamber, would those part elected ones, would they feel a greater legitimacy than the part appointed? Would the appointed people be able to vote? So you create other problems, not insurmountable, but it's an argument against part elected, part appointment. And finally, the fourth option would be abolish. And I'm never quite sure if abolish is a reform. I suppose it's the ultimate reform. You simply get rid of it. Arguments for and against abolishing. A lot of these were in the Scotland Tonight programme. You would save money. You'd streamline the legislative process. Legislation only going through a single chamber. It'd be much more quicker. It would force the Commons to be more effective. It's an interesting one. People say the public bill committees in the Commons, one of the reasons they're so poor at what they do, apart from expertise and whipping, is that MPs know that bills will go to the House of Lords to be scrutinised, and so therefore they kind of shrug their shoulders and say, well, let's just pass it on because we know the Lords are going to do a proper job on it and we get a chance to look at those amendments when they come back. So abolishing the second chamber would force MPs to become more effective and overall be more efficient government. However, abolishing it would remove an important check on the executive. You'd have a unicameral chamber or a unicameral legislature, which would be effective. It would deny outside expertise the opportunity to engage in politics. So there are the 4 options. There would be 100% elected, 100% appointed, part elected, part appointed, or simply abolish. So this sheet here, your summary sheet, I have attached to show my homework, which you're going to show my homework. You'll see what the homework is, and this single sheet here is attached. So the homework for next Monday, which you need to email, is evaluate the arguments for having a fully elected second chamber in the UK Parliament. And so that essay is not just about the arguments against having an elected chamber, but you need to bring in what would be the other options apart from a fully elected chamber, such as 100% appointed, part elected, part appointment. In a way, it's similar to the should first past the post be changed essay. It's not just about first past the post, but to extend your analysis and your argument, what are the alternatives to first past the post and what advantages and disadvantages they might bring. So looking at the 100% elected argument across here is a peg to hang other arguments on as well. Well, it doesn't have to be 100%, it could be this, as well as rehearsing the advantages and disadvantages argument. Okay, so the homework for Monday, which you need to email me, is evaluate the arguments for having a fully elected second chamber. Okay, there'll be a second piece of homework for Wednesday, which is about parliamentary sovereignty, which there will also be another video hopefully for you as well. Okay, shutting down now.